All right, welcome back into the show. And I am pretty excited for this one. We had an exciting week of college football. I was so happy to have football back. Like, having football back is really the greatest thing ever. And it's actually 11:30 at night. I'm recording this on Sunday night. I had to watch the Florida State LSU game. So we got to start there. And I mean, I was saying it in the college football preview that this game is really going to be a huge game. And I was all in on LSU. Really is not looking great at all. Like they just got blown out in the second half in this game. Up 17-14 going into halftime and then just blowing it. Like it was a really tough game. And like looking at the stats in this game, it was really tough to watch Daniels play quarterback in this game. I'm gonna get right into it, just talking about the game. Florida State ended up winning the game 45-24, and it was really rough to watch as like rooting for LSU because, I mean, of course I'm gonna root for my pick. They were my team, but like LSU didn't look like a team that could win the national championship, and you can't take back your pick. I picked LSU, so it's just going to be wrong. And I mean, you can kind of tell because, like, looking at it, Florida State's defensive line just absolutely dominated this whole game. They were dominant all over the place. They destroyed LSU's offensive line and gave Daniels no time to throw. But the thing that I also noticed was Daniels wasn't making plays. Like he was just holding the ball a lot. And having that there's a lot of quarterbacks that don't, they have the ball in the pocket and they don't get the ball off fast enough. There's a lot of quarterbacks like that. I think Jalen Hurts used to struggle with that. There's a lot of people that just hold the ball too long and they get sacked a lot, but it's more because they're holding the ball too long trying to make a decision. And with Daniels, it was kind of like that today. He was holding the ball, trying to make a decision, trying to make a play when a play wasn't there. And I think Florida State's defensive line just absolutely destroyed him doing that. They had an unbelievable game. I mean, looking at the sacks, I'm looking at it, and they had at least 3 sacks looking at it there, and like they're just unbelievable. The flat out unbelievable defensive line, and they had a great defensive game. They came out with a physical edge. And yes, like at the beginning, it didn't look great because they had a lot of penalties to start. It actually started out with 6 penalties for Florida State for 60 yards, which is kind of insane to LSU 0. Some of the personal fouls Florida State was getting was kind of stupid. Like they were dumb calls. And it didn't matter. Like Florida State was there to play. They were there to set that physical edge. And like that's what happens, like it happens to teams that are physical, and they were all over the place. They were doing their job, they were doing what they need, and they got the job done. It was unbelievable. Jordan Travis had an unbelievable game. Ended the game with 23 for 31 from the field, 342 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. He was flat out incredible and really set the tone for Florida State. It just made it so much easier having him there. And Florida State was also able to develop the run game. But I think the main story is Keon Coleman, man. This guy is unbelievable. Michigan State transfer. A lot of people were going crazy about him this offseason. He's just a flat out sensational receiver that's so athletic and can do so many things. So looking at him there, he had an unbelievable game. Ended the game with 9 receptions, 122 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Just incredible. People said he was going to be really good. I didn't expect him to be this good. Like, this is unbelievable. The athleticism he put on display in this game was unbelievable. But I think the story and the thing that impressed me most about Florida State was their third down efficiency. They were 9 for 14 on third downs, which to me, that's just unbelievable. Like, that's so hard to do. And in college football, if you're able to convert those third downs, it's just so draining for a defense. And LSU, they had a lot of talent. They started out that game on defense on fire. They were lighting guys up. They were playing really good defense and making it tough on Travis. They intercepted him once. They made it really difficult. And then a muff punt allows them to stay in the game. And then Florida State started to figure it out in the second half. But, I mean, looking at it that way, like, Florida State, to me, just set the physical tone and just made it really difficult on LSU throughout the game. Again, Yeah, LSU pick, it's going to be wrong. It just is. I mean, it's going to be very tough for them now to make the playoff. That's just kind of how college football works. One loss, like, it's going to hurt you. It's really going to hurt you. And looking at LSU's schedule, it's one of the toughest. It really is. You got home against Arkansas, I think, is a tough game. Some of your road games, you got at Mississippi State. You got at Ole Miss. You also got at Missouri. Those are the road games. They play home against Auburn. They play at Alabama, which that one's crazy tough. And then home against Florida, home against Texas A&M. So, I mean, that's a pretty tough schedule. And I think Bama's what most people are looking at. Like this, that's going to be the tough game. At Ole Miss is also a tough one that they have on September 30th. So that one will be interesting too. But looking at it that way, like, this is a very tough loss. It's going to be very tough for them to bounce back from this and be able to get back in that playoff contention. That means they just have to win all their games in the SEC. And the SEC is a very tough conference to do that in. So if you're an LSU fan, it's really difficult. And I think if you're Jaden Daniels, you got to figure out how to really have some poise in the pocket and be able to stand in there sometimes. But if your offensive line is getting torched like that, you got to be able to make quicker decisions and make some plays, because I really did not think Daniels looked good at all. And a lot of LSU people might be saying it's time to put the backup in, because that backup, he looked nice a few games last year. Let me look up his name real quick. I think it's Nussenmeyer. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Garrett Nussenmeyer was really good last year. So I guess we'll see if you're LSU. I mean, it's tough. And if you're Florida State, man, like, ACC putting teams on notice. And we'll talk about the Saturday games in a little bit. I'm only going to go over the games that I watched. This Florida State game, LSU game, I really dove deep into just because I watched it tonight. So this was a really good game. But if you're Florida State, man, in the ACC, it's you and Clemson now. And I'm very high on Clemson. I like Clemson a lot. So we're going to see if Florida State's going to be able to do something in the ACC. They definitely could. They impressed me a lot. I wasn't a Florida State guy before the year, and they impressed me. I was wrong about them. They're unbelievable. Jordan Travis, unbelievable. Mike Norvell, unbelievable coach. And they're going to be scary coming out. So I'm excited for them. All right, let's move into the Saturday games. And I was actually in West Lafayette for the Purdue-Fresno game. We're going to talk about that in a mini podcast. That's going to come out Tuesday. So I'm going to get to that later. But that means I didn't really catch too many of the 12 o'clock games. So the only 12 o'clock game I want to talk about from Saturday is the Colorado game. And the Colorado game was just flat out unbelievable. Colorado was not supposed to win this game. They were underdogs by 20 points, which is unbelievable. It's the first underdog to come back, or to win in a week one setting of 20 points or more in a long time, in this aspect. And TCU, no matter what anybody says, this is just an unbelievable win. TCU made the championship last year. And I get it. A lot of people are gone. It's a new quarterback. It's a different thing. Chandler Morris apparently didn't play well. But TCU they were able to do some stuff in this game. Bailey had an unbelievable game running. He ended up with 14 carries for 164 yards. And they were able to run the ball and score a lot. So, this was just an unbelievable back and forth game. Colorado ends up winning this game 45-42. And if you don't know Colorado's team very well, just know Deion brought in some guys for this team. And I haven't talked about Colorado too much on the show, more just because of the fact that there's just so much media attention on them. And I wasn't sure whether to take it with a grain of salt or not. But Colorado just proved to everybody that they have put the country on notice with this performance. Shadir Sanders, Deion's son, was flat out unbelievable. He's the quarterback for this Colorado team. He's a 4-star recruit that came to Jackson State with Deion, and then when Deion moved to Colorado, Shadir came with him. So he's now the starting quarterback at Colorado. And this is his stat line from game one, which is flat out ridiculous. He was 38 for 47, 510 passing yards, and 4 passing touchdowns. That is just unbelievable. We have never seen anything like that. And Colorado, I mean, this team is just flat out unbelievable. Flat out unbelievable. Sanders was able to get the ball to so many different backs. Dylan Edwards had a fantastic game. He didn't really run the ball well. He only had 6 carries, 24 yards, but the receiving, he was a monster. 5 receptions, 135 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just an incredible game for Dylan Edwards receiving the ball. Unbelievable. He's a true freshman, by the way, so he'll be something special to watch on the receiving end and hopefully on the rushing end as well. Wilkerson had most of the carries with 13 attempts, 45 yards. They weren't able to get the run game going. But the story for Colorado besides Shedeur Sanders is Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is unbelievable, flat out unbelievable. If you guys don't know who Travis Hunter is, he 2 years ago was the number 2 recruit in all of college football. And he's a cornerback, majority-wise. And he decided to go to Colorado because of Deion Sanders and learning from him and doing all of that. So he went to Jackson State actually originally and followed Deion to Colorado. So getting Travis Hunter was just flat out unbelievable. And people were saying, oh, he's going to play 2 ways. He's going to play receiver and cornerback. And I was like, whoa, that's going to be crazy. I mean, there's no way he can be like top tier at both. But this guy was top tier at both in this game. A flat out unbelievable game. He had 11 receptions, 119 yards in this game. And he had a pick that was just unbelievable. I mean, this guy is so incredible to watch. One of the most dynamic athletes we've seen. Field Yates actually tweeted out during the game that the 2025 mock draft, and this was a joke, but I thought it was so funny and like so true, and how Colorado was like taking the college football world by storm and saying that the number 1 mock draft person in 2025 is Travis Hunter, and the number 2 is Shedeur Sanders. And I just thought that was funny because it was just proven like what they were doing is just so uncommon and so unnatural. Like, it was just so impressive what they did, and winning this game really just puts them over the top, I think. I think the media presence throughout the whole week is just going to be unbelievable. So I think Colorado deserves some praise, and that's why I really wanted to talk about them a little bit on this podcast, and they were just flat out unbelievable. So Colorado, big win. They play Nebraska next week. We're going to talk about Nebraska a little bit later because I watched that game on Thursday. We're going to get the Thursday night games at the end. But I want to move on. We're going to go to another game that I watched. Let's see. So, Ohio State. I want to talk about Ohio State a little bit. Michigan was able to win 30-3, and then we'll get to Michigan State in a little bit as well. But I want to talk about Ohio State. Ohio State ended up winning 23-3 in this game. And I mean, I thought it was going to be an interesting game. A lot of people were just expecting Ohio State to just flat out dominate. But Indiana always finds a way to kind of play teams close. And having Indiana at home and having that much time to prepare for an Ohio State, it kind of makes sense. But Indiana looked horrible in this game. It's just the truth. They didn't look good at all. And Ohio State playing with a new quarterback, we're finally seeing what a guy like Kyle McCord would do. And Kyle McCord was not good. He was not good at all. He was 20 for 33, 239 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a pick. And he just didn't look good. Like, Ohio State it just felt like they were trying to find an identity, and they just couldn't find it in this game. They were running the ball solid. Travion Henderson, 12 carries, 47 yards. And this was just a weird game. Like, they couldn't get their receivers involved, which a lot of people thought Ohio State would be super good because of their receivers. Marvin Harrison struggled with 2 receptions, 18 yards. Emeka Ibuka struggled with 3 receptions, 16 yards. And when your 2 best receivers that were probably the 2 most dynamic receivers in college football last year play like that, it's not going to be great for you. It's just not. So I was really shocked seeing Ohio State just struggle this way. And McCord actually got benched during the game. Devin Brown came in for a few plays, and Devin Brown looked horrible. He was 1 for 3 from the field and had -2 yards passing. And his rushing wasn't great either. He ran for -3 yards rushing. So it's like, it's just very difficult for Ohio State to do really anything offensively, and that's just not common for what we've seen from an Ohio State team. It just isn't. So it's a little nerve-wracking if you're an Ohio State fan, and you don't really have much time to fix it, which kind of sucks because you have Notre Dame coming up. You play Youngstown next week, which definitely should be a win. and then you play Western Kentucky the next week. So you got 2 games to kind of get ready for it. Western Kentucky could give you a fight, though. They got a solid offense. And if we're looking at Ohio State's defense, I talked about it a lot on the preview. The only thing I'm worried about there is the secondary. Indiana's not good enough to beat you over the middle, but I think a team like Western Kentucky could with the passing. So if the secondary struggles a little bit and Western Kentucky can put some points up, that could be interesting too. I'm not saying they're going to win the game. I'm just saying like it could be interesting seeing a passing team play them. And that's why I'm so interested in seeing Notre Dame. You're going to go at Notre Dame, and Kyle McCord is just going to have to be ready for everything. And the way Notre Dame's playing, unbelievable. They really took care of business in their game against, I think it was Sam Houston State. I talked about them a lot on the Week 0 podcast, so if you didn't check that out, check that out. But if you're an Ohio State fan, you should be a little nervous because that was not a great 23-3 win. It just wasn't. All right, let's go to the other 3:30 game that I caught some of, and that was Boise State at Washington. And I just really want to talk about Michael Penix because this guy he is unbelievable. This is one of the greatest performances I've seen in a long time from a quarterback. Like, it was like Shadir Sanders level. Like, it was ridiculous. He was 29 for 40 from the field, 450 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. Michael Penix is just so talented as a quarterback. Can throw on the run, can do anything. And, I mean, I was high on Washington, and a lot of people were high on Washington, and I see why. Like, I wasn't crazy high on Washington. I said that a lot, and I want to keep that point going. But Boise State's a good team. Boise State's going to end near the top of the Mountain West. And I saw one of the other top Mountain West, Fresno State, play. Mountain West is a good conference. It is. And Boise State's a good football team. And Washington just dismantled them. Absolutely dismantled them. And, I mean, I'm so excited because I'm going to the Michigan State-Washington game. And I'm so excited to watch this Washington team play. They play home against Tulsa next week, and you could see that being an absolute blowout because if they're able to blow out a team like Boise State week 1, I'm so scared for the people that they're playing in the future. Washington's got a tough schedule. Like, at Michigan State, still a tough game. It is. Noah Kim, solid quarterback. We're going to get to Michigan State a little bit later. And, you know, it definitely could be tough because that's a hostile environment and it would be a very interesting game to watch. But I think Washington can take care of business. And then you got home against Oregon, probably another tough game for Washington. At Stanford could be interesting. Stanford was solid. All of the Pac-12 teams ended up winning this week, which is an unbelievable stat. We've never seen a Power 5 team, like Power 5 conference, start out like that. And it's funny because the Pac-12 is officially completely disbanded now with Stanford, Cal, and SMU. That doesn't really matter too much, but they all went to the ACC. So the only teams that are left are Washington State and Oregon State, and they're both looking at maybe going to the Mountain West. So, I mean, interesting there. But so going back to Washington's schedule, they play at USC, at Oregon State, and then home against Utah. But 2 road games in November at USC and the at Oregon State. Those are probably the most difficult games. So we'll see with them. I'm very excited to see more of Washington. I think Penix is just unbelievable. And having just such a dynamic quarterback like that makes it so much easier because this team doesn't run the ball very much. They just don't. They kind of go through Penix and let him kind of do what he does. And that's fine because you're so dynamic offensively with your pass game. That's just tough to stop. It is. And Michigan State's always struggled with the secondary. They actually looked solid in the secondary against Central, but Central is a tough team to kind of gauge where like you're at, and we'll talk about that again. But if I'm a Washington fan, like, this team's unreal, and Penix is definitely giving out Heisman vibes. I mean, I think it's him and Caleb right now at the top, and Shadir and Travis Hunter kind of knocking at the door. But, I mean, Washington was just unbelievable. I was so impressed with that win, and I think Washington's a team to be reckoned with. I think Washington and Florida State really proved me wrong with, like, how good they could be. These teams are very impressive. All right, let's get to some of the late games, and I want to talk about Let me scroll down. Yes, I want to talk about North Carolina and South Carolina. This game was very interesting to me because I wanted to see Drake May. I was very interested to see him. I hadn't watched too much of him last year. I just would always see highlights on how dynamic he was and how athletic he could make his moves. And some of the throws he made in this game were unbelievable. He had some touchdown passes that were just ridiculous balls. And I mean, I listened to the Solid Verbal, which is another great college football podcast. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to that. They do unbelievable stuff. But I mean, I love how they said, like, he just looks like a pro quarterback. He's so in control of the game, and that's so important in college football. Like, you got to have control. You just do. And Drake May did an unbelievable job controlling this game. Yes, he threw 2 balls that were really bad, and I did not think he played a great second half. But if I'm looking at Drake May as a whole, I'm okay with it because I think he actually played an excellent game and was able to do some stuff. And 269, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. It's not the best game in the world. But North Carolina was a lot better than South Carolina. And again, like, the ACC put out a message that they got real football this year. I think North Carolina is going to be solid. Their defense looked a little better. They did play a really bad South Carolina O-line. I mean, it's atrocious. Spencer Rattler has no help on that team. I thought Rattler played an unbelievable game with 353 yards and no turnovers, 30 for 39, but he had no time throughout the whole game. I believe he was sacked 6 times. It was something unbelievable. I'm going to check it real quick. Let's see. He was sacked 9 times. Sorry, 9 times. That's flat out ridiculous. And the QB pressures were unbelievable as well. So, I mean, I think Spencer Rattler is one of the most talented quarterbacks. I've always been a very big Spencer Rattler guy. I was not a South Carolina guy this year because they lost a lot, and Spencer Rattler is going to have no help, and it just showed in this one. Like 9 sacks to a North Carolina defense that wasn't that good last year. So I need to see North Carolina like play a solid offense before. Like, Appalachian State could be interesting because Appalachian scored 50 points on them last year. So if they can kind of slow them down, that might be interesting. And I know that Appalachian lost some guys, so, like, yes. And then they also play Minnesota, which would be a solid game to look at, and then Pittsburgh. So they got a decent schedule where there's gonna be some tough games, and we'll definitely get some answers from North Carolina. But I do have my answer on Drake May. I am kind of in on Drake May. I'm not completely in. I'm not there completely because I did see some points where I was like, what is he doing? He's trying to do too much here. But I do like Drake May for North Carolina, and I think North Carolina is a little better this year. I really do. I am excited for that. All right, so let's switch over. We are going to go to... Let's go to the Penn State game. With Penn State, they are very interesting in the way that I think their defense is just flat out, it's really good. It's tough. I mean, they have one of the best D-lines in the country, I think. I mean, D-line wise, Penn State is just off the charts. They got guys all over the place, and corner-wise, they're unbelievable. They have 2 corners that just shut down West Virginia throughout the whole game. It was unbelievable. I like West Virginia's quarterback. Like, I didn't think he was that bad, and a lot of people thought West Virginia would just be a train wreck in this game, but I thought Green was solid. I mean, 162, it doesn't look great, but he had some glimpses where he was able to create some plays against Penn State. The first drive, almost of the game, West Virginia went right down the field and scored a touchdown, and I was like, wait, is this Penn State defense for real? And then Penn State turned it up and didn't allow a point until like the 4th quarter. They were unbelievable later. And talking about Drew Aller, I want to talk about him. Drew Aller looked unbelievable. Unbelievable. He ended the game 21 for 29, 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I mean, everything that it has been said about this guy is true. He is just so dynamic as a quarterback. He can do so many things. And, like, Penn State did a great job with their running backs. They used them both very well. Singleton with 13 carries, 70 yards. Katron Allen with 10 carries, 51 yards. He was flat out sensational. And like looking at that, like they do a great job of using both. And Drew Aller just had so much control at the line. Like you just felt like, and I wasn't even a Penn State fan like watching. I just wanted to see Penn State, but you just felt at ease with him in control. And that's like a huge thing. Huge thing. You just don't get that with too many quarterbacks. And with him in the game, if I was Penn State, I just felt at ease. I felt like he was in control of the situation and he was going to make the right play, and he did. He made some tough throws, and there were a lot of drops that I saw. There's a lot of drops with Aller throwing unbelievable balls. I think he could have finished the game 25 for 29, which is just a ridiculous stat line, almost the same stat line JJ had, which was 26 for 30. And he's used to his receivers by now. This is Aller's first year, but I was very impressed with Aller. I think he's going to have an unbelievable year, and I'm excited to see where Penn State heads in the future. I mean, I think they're going to be for real. It's a good win against West Virginia. I actually think West Virginia is going to be solid in the Big 12. Looking at Penn State's schedule in the future, they play Delaware next, which should be interesting. And then they got Illinois and Iowa back-to-back. That's where it's going to be fun. I mean, Illinois could be interesting. Like, Illinois could give you some trouble. Again, they won on a game-winning field goal against Toledo, so, like, I'm not sure they're, like, crazy. It could be solid. And then home against Iowa, that'll be a lot of fun. The whiteout, probably. I mean, they can have so many whiteout games if they feel like it. And, you know, with Ohio State not looking great, I think Penn State looked like the clear number 2 in the Big Ten right now. I mean, Ohio State, I'm just going to say it. I trust Penn State right now way more than I trust Ohio State. It's just the truth. I mean, Drew Aller, I think, is a much better quarterback than Kyle McCord. I think they have a better defense than Ohio State. I think the only thing Ohio State has going for them over Penn State would be the receiving, and Penn State has some questions on the receiving end because there were a lot of drops in this game. But, I mean, I'd rather have a better quarterback, and I'd rather have a better defense. It's just the truth. And with Ryan Day, like, I think Ryan Day is a better coach than James Franklin. I do. But I think just Penn State has more answers to the questions of like their identity than Ohio State does. So I'd rather be in the position that Penn State's in than Ohio State at the moment. All right. I am now going to switch over to Thursday. We got to talk about some of the Thursday games. I just want to talk about the 2 main Thursday games, which was, I believe, it was Nebraska and Minnesota. Let's talk about that one first just because it has Big Ten impacts. And, I mean, this game was boring. It was really boring. I watched majority of the second half just because it was a close game and the other game wasn't, like, as close, you know. Minnesota ended up winning this game 13-10, and it was a boring game. It really was. I think Matt Rule's putting in a good system, and I think the Nebraska players really like playing for him, which is a good sign for Matt Rule because, you know, like Matt Rule, he's known for building these things slowly. And I think with Nebraska, it's going to end up being slowly. They figured some stuff out in the second half. Like, it wasn't too much. They scored on a trick play that didn't really work. The guy dropped the ball, the receiver, the quarterback on the throwback, he dropped the ball, like picked it up and then threw it, and they scored. So it was like a weird trick play that they scored on. So in order to get some wins, they're really going to have to figure out their offense and their scoring. And with Minnesota, they were playing a weird style because last year they were a running attack, and this year they're switching to a passing attack because their running back left. So it's just going to be a weird game. I think a lot of people thought it would be like this. So Minnesota won the game 13-10. And Sims, the quarterback for Nebraska, I don't love him. I really don't. He didn't have much poise in the pocket. He threw 1 touchdown, 3 picks, 114 yards, only threw the ball 19 times. I just don't think he's that dynamic of a quarterback. He had 91 rushing yards, and, I mean, that's a great way to attack a defense. But I just don't love quarterbacks that can only do one thing. Like, I don't love just running quarterbacks. I just don't. I know it's college football, and sometimes those quarterbacks can be super valuable. But I just don't think it's that valuable for a team like Nebraska. I just don't. And looking at Nebraska in the future, you got Colorado next. I feel like it's going to be really rough. And, I mean, I just don't have much faith. I think it's going to be a very difficult year in the Big Ten. And I think that's okay. I do. I mean, there's not much you should expect after Scott Frost leaving and Matt Rule's trying to put his system into play. So if Nebraska fans can be patient, you guys 1 or 2 years, you could be back to where you want to be, but you're going to have to be a little patient. And then looking at Minnesota, I like their quarterback. They call him the Greek Freak or the Greek Rifle, one of the two. I don't know, because I'm not going to even try to say his last name. It's super long. He was 24 for 44, 196, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. So they really went to that passing offense. So we'll see. We'll see. I think Nebraska's defense actually played really well and made it difficult for him. So Minnesota actually does play North Carolina, like I was talking about, which I think will actually be a cool matchup and interesting to see, like a kind of middle of the road Big Ten team against a team like that. They play Eastern Michigan next week, and then they'll play at North Carolina, and then they'll have a tough Big Ten. So, like, it should be interesting looking at Minnesota. I think they're going to be a solid team in the West. I don't know if they're going to be top tier in the West because they have to play Michigan and Ohio State, which is just tough. And I think Wisconsin's going to be the team that ends up getting out of there. I'm pretty high on Wisconsin, and even with a bad game from Mordecai, their quarterback, they still ended up beating Buffalo pretty good. So I'm looking at that. I think Minnesota could compete, but again, playing Michigan, playing Ohio State, it just makes it so much tougher.
Hello, hello. This is Giovanni Mosheri. You may have heard me a couple times on Jake's Takes. I am the sports media director of Oakland University's campus radio station, WXOU, and I've been the host for about 2 years of a weekly sports show called The Jomo Show, where we cover all of Oakland University athletics, including a weekly update on scores and highlights, as well as interviews with athletes or those otherwise involved in athletics. You can listen to The Jomo Show live on WXOU Thursdays at 6, or you can tune in to me afterwards on Spotify. It's The Jomo Show.
All right, let's get to the last game I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about Utah and Florida. And looking at this game, Utah, the game plan that Kyle Whittingham came up with in this game was just unbelievable. Before we start talking about Utah and how good they are, I really want to talk about Kyle Whittingham and what he's done with this program. I mean, it's just flat out sensational. Utah doesn't get enough credit for how sensational they've been at football these past few years. He's been at Utah 18 years, and they have been competing near the top of the Pac-12 pretty much since he's gotten there. It's flat out unbelievable, and people just don't talk about Utah that way. They've won 2 straight Pac-12 championships. 2 straight. And nobody talks about it just because they don't make the college football playoff. And, I feel like it's just undervalued to win 10 games a season and win your conference. I just do. And yes, you could say the Pac-12, hasn't been the same. But looking at it now, I just talked about it earlier on the podcast that the Pac-12 won every single one of their games. Every single one of their games this week, which is flat out sensational. We've never seen that from a conference in week 1. And they did it all. And it started with Utah on this Thursday night. They were flat out sensational. They didn't even have Cam Rising in this game. Cam Rising is out for the game, and they're playing 2 quarterbacks. They're playing Bryson Barnes, who started out the game with a 76-yard passing touchdown, which was unbelievable. I was at work, cleaning out carts and stuff, and I was watching the game, and I was going crazy after that play. I was like, oh my gosh, this is how we're starting college football this year. Let's go. I was so hyped. And then they used Nate Johnson a lot too. They used Nate Johnson more for his legs. He had 45 yards rushing too. Hadn't had 4 passing attempts. I mean, he was pretty good during this game. And Utah just kind of took over. They were like brute force, and their defense was so physical throughout the whole game. It was really tough for Graham Mertz to be able to take control and be who he is. I think Florida did a great job at putting Graham Mertz in spots he was comfortable. He threw a lot of short balls and ended up going 31 for 44, which is actually pretty solid completion percentage-wise. He had 333 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, which is a solid game, but they couldn't get the run game going. Trevor Etienne struggled to get his run game going, and with Mertz, like, he's just not a crazy dynamic quarterback, so you can't, like, fall in love with him. And I feel like it's just difficult to succeed when you're not able to get the ball down the field and you're only focused on that short game. It's just difficult to succeed in college that way, especially at an SEC program, and especially when you're playing against tough physical defenses like Utah. I think Utah's defense is very good. I think Utah is one of those tough teams in the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is just unbelievable this year. I mean, looking at the teams I've talked about, like Utah is unbelievable. USC's got an unbelievable offense. We talked about Washington a ton. Oregon State I didn't even get to. They looked unbelievable today. And, I mean, just you could go down. Oregon I didn't even talk about. They're flat out crazy. I mean, the Pac-12's tough, and I praised Colorado for what they did today. So Pac-12's crazy. Pac-12's crazy, and they deserve a lot of credit. And it's cool because it's the last year of the Pac-12, so it's really cool to be talking about them that way.